Hello everyone, welcome to our channel University of Political Science. Toda I discusses about Aristotle political ideals. About the time when Plato was asked by Dion to undertake the venture in Syracuse for the education of the young Dionysus, and the improvement of Syracusan government, the greatest of Plato's students joined the academy. Aristotle was not an Athenian but a native of Stagira in Thrace, where he was born in 384. His father was a physician, which probably contributed to the prevailing interest in biological studies that Aristotle's work shows, and had been attached in that capacity to the Macedonian court. Aristotle was probably attracted to Plato's school in the first place, because it was the best place in Greece to carry on advanced studies. Once there, he remained a member of the school as long as Plato lived, a period of 20 years, and his mind received indelibly the impression of Plato's teaching. Every page of his later philosophical writing bears witness to this connection. After Plato's death in 347, Aristotle left Athens, and during the next 12 years was variously employed. To this period belongs the first of his independent writing. In 343 he became the instructor of the young prince Alexander of Macedon, but one looks in vain in his political writings for any effect of his Macedonian connection upon his ideas. He seems to have lacked the imagination necessary to see the revolutionary importance of Alexander's conquest of the East, with the consequent mingling of Greek and Oriental civilization. The choice of such a policy was directly contrary to everything that he must have taught his royal pupil about politics. In 335 Aristotle opened his own school in Athens, the second of the four great philosophical schools, and during the next 12 years most of his books were written, though they probably included work begun during the earlier period. Aristotle survived his great pupil by a year. He died in Euboea in 322, after leaving Athens to escape the anti-Macedonian disturbances that followed Alexander's death. The new science of politics. The Aristotelian writings present a problem very different from that of Plato's dialogues. His extant works, neglecting fragments of early popular writings, were for the most part not books completed and prepared for publication. They were used in connection with his teaching, though important parts of them were probably written before the Lyceum was opened. In fact, they were not published in their present form until 4 centuries after his death, but remained the property of the school, and were doubtless used by later instructors. It seems probable that the 12 years of Aristotle's life as head of the Lyceum were largely occupied in directing a number of extensive projects of research, shared by his students, such as the famous investigation of the constitutional history of 158 Greek cities, of which the Constitution of Athens, discovered in 1891, is the only surviving example. These researches, of which the study of the constitutions was only one, were mainly historical rather than philosophical. They were genuinely empirical investigations, and in the light of them Aristotle from time to time made additions to the body of writings which he already had by him when the school was opened. The great political treatise which goes by the name of the Politics cannot therefore be regarded as a finished book such as Aristotle would have produced had he been writing for a general public. It has been doubted in fact, whether Aristotle himself arranged it in its existing form, or whether it may not have been put together by his editors from several bodies of manuscript. The difficulties lie upon the surface and could hardly be missed by any attentive reader, but the solution of them is another matter. Later editors have shifted the books about in an attempt to improve the order, but no rearrangement of the text will make a unified and finished work of the Politics. Thus Book 7, in which Aristotle takes up the construction of an ideal state, apparently goes on from the end of Book 3, while Books 4v and 6, dealing with actual and not ideal states, form a group by themselves. For this reason Books 6 and 7 are usually put after Book 3, and Books 4 to 6 at the end, yet there is a connection between the discussion of monarchy near the end of Book 3, and the discussion of oligarchy and democracy in Book 4. So far as the reading of the text goes, there are difficulties in any order, and probably Ross is right when he says that the reader might as well take it as it stands traditionally. The best hypothesis which has so far been advanced to explain the Politics is that by Werner Jaeger. And while this is not demonstrated, it at least offers a reasonable way of envisaging the development of Aristotle's political philosophy. According to Jaeger, the Politics as it stands is Aristotle's work, and not that of an editor. But the text belongs to two stages and therefore falls into two main strata. There is, in the first place, a work dealing with the ideal state, and with previous theories of it. This includes Book 2, an historical study of earlier theories and chiefly notable for the criticism of Plato. Book 3, a study of the nature of the state and of citizenship, but intended to be introductory to a theory of the ideal state, and Books 7 and 8 on the construction of the ideal state. These four books Jaeger assigns to a date not long after Aristotle's departure from Athens following the death of Plato. There is, in the second place, a study of actual states, mainly democracy and oligarchy, together with the causes of their decay and the best means of giving them stability, which makes up books 4, v, and 6. This Jaeger assigns to a date after the opening of the Lyceum, supposing that it represents to turn to political philosophy after or during the investigation of the 158 constitutions. Books 4, v, and 6 were inserted by Aristotle in the middle of the original draft, and result in enlarging his work on the ideal state into a general treatise on political science. Finally, Jaeger believes, book was written last of all as a general introduction to the enlarged treatise, though it was joined hastily and imperfectly to Book 2. According to Jaeger's conception, therefore, the Politics was intended to form a treatise on a single science, but was never subjected to the rewriting that would have been necessary to bring the parts, written as they were over a period of perhaps 15 years, into a well-unified form. If this hypothesis be correct, the Politics represents two stages in Aristotle's thought which are distinguished by the distance that he has traveled in emancipating himself from the influence of Plato, or perhaps it would be better to say, in striking out a line of thought and investigation characteristically his own. In the first, he still thinks of political philosophy as the construction of an ideal state upon lines already laid down, especially in the Statesman and the Laws. Plato's revealingly ethical interest in the subject still predominates. The good man and the good citizen are one and the same, or at all events they ought to be, and the end of the state is to produce the highest moral type of human being. It is not to be supposed that Aristotle consciously abandoned this point of view, since the treatise on the ideal state was left standing as an important part of the Politics. At some date not far removed from the opening of the Lyceum, however, he conceived a science or art of politics on a much larger scale. The new science was to be general, that is, it should deal with actual as well as ideal forms of government, and it should teach the art of governing and organizing states of any sort in any desired manner. This new general science of politics, therefore, was not only empirical and descriptive, but even in some respects independent of any ethical purpose, since a statesman might need to be expert in governing even a bad state. The whole science of politics, according to the new idea, included the knowledge both of the political good, relative as well as absolute, and also of political mechanics employed perhaps for an inferior or even a bad end. This enlargement of the definition of political philosophy is Aristotle's most characteristic conception. The description of Aristotle's political theory can therefore be advantageously divided into two parts. The source for the first is books 2, 3, 7, and 8. The questions to be considered here are the relations of his thought to Plato's in his first attempt at an independent philosophy, and especially the suggestions, in so far as they can be discerned, that presage the final step which took him quite beyond Plato. The source for the second is books 4, v, and 6, and the questions here are his final thoughts on the kinds of government, his conception of the social forces behind political organization and change, and his description of the means with which the statesman has to work. Finally, in the opening chapters of book he said his last word about the great philosophical problem upon which both he and Plato had been engaged, the distinction of nature from appearance, or convention, and suggested the conception of nature to which his ripest political reflection led him. More informations, please visit our website www.politicalscienceview.com. Thanks. See again to new topics.